Everybody talks about billionaires, but there's 16 times as many centimillionaires. They have less gatekeepers. They're less famous. Less people are pitching them, asking them for their time. It might be cool to watch a show called Billions or, see Mark Cuban destroy somebody over a horrible valuation on Shark Tank. The reality is putting your energy into working with local ultra wealthy 30 million plus and local centimillionaires is going to be a much greater return on your time.
Welcome to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association, providing benefits and services to real estate investors and rental property owners for over 48 years. With your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group.
This episode is sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. And RCB and Associates, helping real estate investors and small business owners navigate the complex world of health insurance and Medicare benefits at rcbassociatesllc.com. Hello and welcome to episode 184. Today, we're going to talk about raising capital from a source that we typically don't consider when we're putting together the equity for our investment opportunities. We've discussed syndication and raising private money from high net worth accredited investors. But what about raising money from the ultra wealthy? My guest today is going to talk about that with us. His name is Richard Wilson, and he's the founder and CEO of Family Office Club. And he's going to help us understand what the ultra wealthy look for when investing their capital, the top 6 headaches of family offices, and how you might be able to help them while funding your opportunities. Richard is also the author of Centimillionaire Migraines, as well as other books on family offices. He also runs the largest community of family offices globally, called the Family Office Club, with over 1,750 registered family offices. Richard, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me here, Brian. Appreciate it.
Why don't we just start with understanding what family offices are? Because this is a term that I would bet many of our listeners are not familiar with.
Sure. A family office is a more holistic, more complete investment management or wealth management solution for the ultra wealthy. And the easiest way to understand it is that if you're worth $10,000 and you make a mistake that costs you 5% of your net worth, it's not that expensive of a mistake. You might ask for a friend for help or your parents or your spouse, but it's not a big financial mistake if you're worth $10,000. If you're worth $10 million, you can imagine even a 5% mistake or a 2% mistake could be costly, and you could hire a consultant for a few hours to help you prevent making that again. And if you're worth $100 million or $400 million, even just a 1% mistake could have paid for a whole team to help you play defense, reduce chaos in your investments, source better deals, talk to all your solution providers and accountants and lawyers and insurance agents for you, and keep all the books straight and everything organized. So you can see that the cost of a mistake gets greater. The complexity is greater. You're more likely to make a mistake when you're ultra wealthy because you have 20 LLCs and 5 businesses and everybody wants access to your time and your checkbook. So the mistakes are more likely to happen if you don't have a higher level of organization for the higher level of things going on. And they're more expensive when they do happen. And that's why family offices exist. And even though I know most of you hearing this term right now for the first time, we're like, hey, is this like a new thing? Is it a brand new thing? Is this like a marketing thing that Richard made up? It's been around for decades, but it's not till the last 10 years that this has really become a popular structure for the ultra wealthy. And there's well over 10,000 family offices globally that are highly formalized.
Yeah, when I first heard the term family office, I thought, well, what is that, like a family-owned company that has some sort of business? But it's not. It's what you're talking about is a family office that helps control their investments and helps to make sure that they're actually receiving some sort of return from their investments.
Yeah, exactly. I'm pretty sure some of my college friends and aunts and uncles think I help people set up home-based businesses, and that's like for sure not what we do. We're helping people that just sold their business for $300 million set up how they're going to manage all that wealth and invest it in real estate, operating businesses, and, plan well for estate planning and taxation.
So who exactly are you talking about at this level? I mean, are you when you talk about family offices and people with ultra, high net worth, are you talking about people with tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars? Kind of explain that a little bit.
Sure. Well, the needs start at the $20 million level. At $20, $30 million, you're going to probably start buying a good amount of real estate or direct investments or investing in operating businesses or funds or sponsors. But as you get closer to 100 million, it's more and more inevitable that you are doing that type of activity. If there was a word for 30 millionaire or 50 millionaire, I would be using that within our books and our brand. But the reality is that the word ultra wealthy usually refers to 30 million and up. It's a very loose term. It doesn't mean something exact. Where billionaire means you're worth $1 billion plus net worth between you and your spouse or your family. And centimillionaire, which most people have not heard, means 100 million plus. It has a discrete meaning. It's not loose. It's not flimsy. It means something very exact, which means over 100 million net worth is centimillionaire. So at that point, you're paying for a family office, whether you have one or not. If you don't have one, you're making mistakes, you're moving slower, you have extra chaos and stress, you're probably not optimized on your activities each quarter, you're not seeing the best deal flow. So at that level, there's no doubt you need a family office. And then, somewhere between 20 and 50, the need gets greater and greater and continues up to the 100 level.
Now, it does seem like if you reach that point where you're a centimillionaire or even a 30 millionaire, you'd have the sophistication and savvy to have tapped into a family office by that point. Is that not the case?
No, it's not the case. Many times people don't even know what a family office exists. I know a billionaire in New York City who works in real estate, and he had no idea what a family office is or why he would need one. And he's in, the city where there's the most family offices on planet Earth. And so what usually happens, though, is that somebody's busy running their business, like a client we're working to onboard now. They ran their manufacturing company for 22 years, sold it for a couple $100 million. Now they're putting together the family office. And while researching how to do so, they found our book called How to Start a Family Office, got on the phone with me, and then came and spent a couple days in our office together. But many times people don't hear about the term until they have the liquidity event, or they don't hear about it until the need is so great that there's pain being created. So they really start to do a whole bunch of research on what the ultra wealthy do to manage their wealth. They realize their current system is not working.
I'm going to ask you a question that I want to circle back to later on in the conversation in more detail, but just at a very high level, what we were talking about so far, family offices, centimillionaires, 30 millionaires, is there a way for our listeners to take advantage or tap into that market for their investment opportunities?
Yes. Yeah, there definitely are many ways. And I think it's important to scope this out right for those that are listening to this, because some might be about to turn this off saying like, well, it's not realistic for me to work with a billionaire. Like this podcast episode is not for me. But one thing to consider is that there are 211,000 people globally that we know of, and in many countries, people don't want to be known as ultra wealthy, but that we know of, there's 211,000 people worth over $30 million each. There's over 55,000 people worth over $100 million. And there's around 3,000 billionaires that have been identified. So one thing to keep in mind is that everybody talks about billionaires, but there's 16 times as many centimillionaires. They have less gatekeepers, they're less famous, less people are pitching them, asking them for their time. So it might be cool to watch a show called Billions or, see Mark Cuban destroy somebody over a horrible valuation on Shark Tank. The reality is putting your energy into working with local ultra wealthy 30 million plus and local centimillionaires is going to be a much greater return on your time. And a couple of shortcuts for actually getting progress on this, because that was your question, is looking at what are you raising capital for, what type of real estate, what type of business, and then finding people who already understand that space or who are local to the deal. So if you're based in San Diego and you're raising capital for a deal in Chicago, but you're trying to pitch an investor in Miami, unless there's some background there or they've known you for a decade or invested with you before, that's going to be a hard pitch because they're not local to the deal, they're not local to you. It's going to be challenging. And so going to people who are already aware of the stem cell industry or self-storage or whatever the areas you're raising capital in and are local to you or the deal is really important. And the last thing I'd say about that, and in terms of being effective at raising capital from these groups, is that there's always three trust curves at play when you're trying to close a deal. There's the curve you have to move somebody up, this curve of trust in you as the principal. You have to move them up the trust curve of the industry as a whole, like how do data centers work, how do office parks work or multifamily, and then the curve of the individual deal. And so if you think about it this way, that's why people start with friends and family money, and they go to their friends and family first to raise their first couple deals. And then they go to usually either referrals of them or some local investors. But it's very hard if you go to someone who has no trust in you. They don't know you yet. They don't know the industry yet. They've never invested in self-storage, for example, or a single-family residential property for a rental. And then they are not local to you or the deal. That just makes it very, very challenging. So I just try to make it so that you are giving yourself every advantage possible walking in the door so you can make effective use of your time if that's your purpose of listening to this today.
I'd like to take a moment to tell you about Green Property Management. Not only do they manage everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area, they also manage my entire portfolio. So I can tell you from personal experience that their unique flat fee management style is worth a closer look. If you feel that your property isn't operating to its fullest potential, then Green Property Management can help you take a holistic approach that will save you money, eliminate your headaches, and increase your net income. And if you're a property manager interested in applying Green Property Management's model, give them a call at 1-866-95-GREEN or visit them on the web at greenpropertymgt.com. So to sum that up, they're looking for trust in you as an individual, someone they can trust their money with, trust in the actual kind of market or concept of the investment, and then trust in the specific investment itself. Does that sum it up?
Right. Correct.
Great. So I want to come back to that. I want to come back to the whole idea of how our listeners can reach in and help in this space. But let's take it from the centimillionaires and ultra wealthy's perspective. What are some of the concerns that they have when they come to you or they start a family office as far as placing their funds?
Sure. Trust is a huge concern. Alignment is a big concern. Many people see the ultra wealthy as cheap. They're not cheap. They just like to pay for value. They don't mind paying a Rolls-Royce sticker tag, but they want to get a Rolls-Royce or a McLaren for that. They don't want to get a Honda and pay for a Rolls. And I think that many of them are dealing with challenges around how to structure their direct investments, how to optimize their taxes, how to deal with their 50 or 100 different LLCs they might have built up over time if they've been wealthy for a while. And they really have a sense of more going on per day than ever before. And they're afraid of what they're missing on estate planning, taxes, deal flow. And they know they could be much more effective with better support systems in place and better governance and solution providers that are at the family office quality all around them. So there's some real pain points, related to that and symptoms that come from all those problems.
I'm sure there must be a couple ultra wealthy listening to this episode. Do family offices help with all of that? Tax matters, kind of unwinding the 50 LLCs that they've set up during their lifetime and putting it all into kind of a logical order.
For sure. Family offices can help with that. And in some cases, you might need 75 LLCs instead of 50. But they're used to dealing with the level of complexity is what's most important. They're not going to look at it and say, whoa, this is crazy. Let's reduce it just so it's easier for me as the accountant or your business attorney to understand what's going on here. It could be that it's better to protect each of your real estate assets or each of your investments within its own LLC and even have another layer or two of LLCs or trust to distance yourself from the liability or taxation short term or for equity, transference to the next generation, et cetera. We have a division called Centimillionaire Advisors where we work with clients on setting up their single family office or developing their direct investment program. And many times clients come to us because most multifamily offices and wealth management firms are built for those that are worth 1 million, 5 million, 10 million. They're not built for those that are worth 30, 50, 100 million plus. So you go in there and they just want to play a defensive strategy for you and diversify you into 400 things. But you're an entrepreneur. You're a first generation, very successful player in the game of capitalism. You want to invest in some operating businesses. You want to find some independent sponsors or do some commercial real estate cash flowing investments and have those at arm's length, but maybe you get to pick deal by deal what you invest in. It's very natural in the DNA of a first generation centimillionaire, and that's who we really serve most often.
Does that mean they want to be a little bit more hands-on with the investment that they get into?
In the area where they created their wealth, or they now identified one or two areas where they want to apply their brain going forward, then they could be wanting to be more involved. It also could be the difference of, a second or third generation family might say, okay, well, let's allocate to some big institutional investment funds, where the entrepreneurial person might say, let's find a really hungry, medium-sized independent sponsor. They might be doing 4 deals a year. I'm going to cherry pick the 1 or 2 I also believe in most. And let me gather up 4 to 7 groups like that. They're going to give me diverse exposure, diverse thinking, different strategies, geographical exposures, et cetera, so that they're not running the deal themselves, but they feel like they're picking and choosing. They might try to negotiate down fees or have more performance-based fees instead of management fees in place. So, they've found in their lives that they add value by, controlling their path through the jungle and not just saying for their whole portfolio, hey, I trust you, charge me some fees and run with it. That they're usually doing that for the defensive portion of the portfolio. But cash flowing commercial real estate, they typically like to have a say, and then for direct investments into operating businesses as well.
Yeah, so talk about that from the sponsor's perspective. So, and by sponsor, I mean the person who's put together an investment opportunity. And let's use a multifamily apartment building as an example. So, a sponsor has put together a deal, negotiated a purchase price, and let's say they're trying to raise over $10 million in equity to take down, say, maybe 400-unit apartment complex. Typically, and the way that I see that typically done is they'll syndicate it and bring in multiple accredited investors who, maybe the minimum investment is $50,000 to $100,000. But if they are able to go to the family office space, it seems like they could raise that equity a lot more efficiently. But what does that really look like when they make that switch?
Yeah, great question. So I'm going to give a couple examples. I had this conversation yesterday, and then this morning I sent an email to one of my clients at Centimillionaire Advisors about some teasers, and I was asking him for his preferences on multifamily sponsors by chance. So the generic way that most sponsors go out in the marketplace is say, hey, I've got this multifamily building, 400 units, et cetera, and we've got 6, 7, 8% preferred return for you, and then we're going to take maybe 20% to 33% of fees. Sometimes if they hit a second hurdle of a 10 or 12% preferred return, they'll then take 40% or even 50% of fees. Those equations can change by 20% or 30% off what I just said, but that's the norm. And sometimes family offices, they want to play a unique game. So one of my neighbors here on the island of Key Biscayne, his background is in debt. He created his wealth through debt, and he's sitting on cash from that. So I told him, one unique game to play as an ultra-wealthy individual is to kind of go into the marketplace and find independent sponsors who are closing deals, and either post-close or before the close, come into the deal but structure it as a debt note so that you get, say a 6, 7, 8% return, but it's backed by the collateral of the property. If the sponsor wants to have more of the pie at the end of the day, once your note is done, you're off the cap table completely. And then when the property sells in 7 years or whatever, they're going to have a larger take out of that property, even though they only put maybe the 10% down, which is kind of the industry standard for a sponsor.
If you are thinking of leaving your W-2 job and becoming a full-time real estate investor, one of the greatest costs you must consider is healthcare for you and your family. When I made this transition 5 years ago, I found the whole healthcare insurance process to be confusing and frustrating. That's why I'm glad I met Chad Creasy at RCB and Associates. Chad is a professional healthcare insurance agent who helps real estate investors sponsors and small business owners understand and choose their best healthcare options. And best of all, his services are covered by the insurance company and won't cost you a dime. If you are expecting a change in your healthcare insurance coverage for any reason, or losing employer coverage or transitioning into Medicare, then you owe it to yourself to contact Chad Creasy at rcbassociatesllc.com.
The other phone conversation I had yesterday was with someone who said, well, I go to sponsors who just closed a deal. Maybe they closed it 3 to 6 months ago. They're getting ready to buy their next deal. So he is looking to buy out the sponsor equity from the deal they just closed. And maybe the sponsor put down 10%. He might buy 8% of that 10% at the same valuation that the sponsor put into the deal. But now the deal has settled. It closed. It's cash flowing for a few months. Improvements are starting to be made. There's a greater clarity on exactly how that investment is going right out of the gates, and you get the due diligence of how it's done after the investment closed. And that's a unique approach. Other approaches I've seen that are also unique is having a higher performance fee, a lower or no management fee. And another really innovative structure is to do something where you're buying the property as a sponsor. You might put up 10% yourself. You then raise the valuation per share of that property, syndicate it to your LPs. And then because you raised the valuation by 6%, your 10% now became a 16% stake in that property. And you're just taking out dividends, just like you're one of the investors, and you're in it with your investor now. And you hire a property manager or manage it yourself for some sort of fair fee. But those are some of the unique structures. And the main point there is that families value a superior way of going about things. And that's part of the value they want as a family office. They want to do things in a smarter way, a more effective way. And they know from running their businesses that anytime you're following the crowd is probably not the best idea. It's probably not the optimized way to do things. Like Dan Kennedy says, if you're not sure what to do, just look around and do the opposite of everybody else, and you'll probably be in pretty good shape.
Well, I would imagine that family offices, if they're coming up with some creative ways and structures that appeal to them, but I would imagine they run into some resistance with sponsors of these types of opportunities who also have a very specific way that they like to do it. I mean, how do you see that typically work out for them?
Yeah, I mean, it's an entrepreneurial conversation. I mean, some sponsors will think about it and come back and say, well, you know what, it would make my life easier if on every deal you as the head of the family office would come in and supply 20 or 30% of the LP base that I need. If you're willing to do that, they don't give you these good terms, or maybe they're willing to systematically commit, and as long as it's in the geographical region and meets the cap rates and quality conditions, et cetera, they might agree and have an LOI or something that they would put up, 50% or some dollar amount every time. So they systematically have more. Or they say, okay, but I want you to come in as a co-GP, and that way when I go out to my LPs, I can tell them that we're putting down 25% on each property. All the other sponsors you invest in only put up 5 or 10%. We believe in what we're doing. So it's a matter of how can the sponsor use that much larger check size to their advantage by boosting the credibility, speeding up their closes, having them be more so they can sleep better at night knowing they will close on time and they will be able to find those LP dollars. I think that's why they're willing to at least entertain some of these ideas, because you really just need 2 to 4 family office type investors to gain massive momentum, where you might need 30 private investors to get that same amount of momentum or more.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I was at a conference recently where a very respected and experienced syndicator and sponsor was saying that his average investor is only investing like $100,000 to $150,000 a piece, and he was wondering, well, how do we find those investors who are willing to invest a higher dollar amount on average, so you don't have to find as many investors? And it sounds like for a sophisticated sponsor who's willing to work with family offices and negotiate terms that work for both parties, you can really come up with that solution by figuring out a sophisticated way to make sure both parties are getting what they need.
Right. It's really about alignment more than anything else.
Knowing that money is there really helps you move quicker and take down more.
Right. And the mindset should be long-term greedy. Forget about the short term. Yeah, you're going to make less on this deal, but maybe you can close 4 deals a year instead of 3. Or maybe now with the greater credibility, this family office will open doors to other family offices. So I think you have to be long-term minded about things. One group within the Family Office Club, the platform we run, in the last 2 years, they've grown by over $1 billion in assets under management because they have very lean, well-aligned fees that are very unique in the marketplace. We have 6,500 people a year coming through the Family Office Club capital raising workshops and investor summits. I don't know a single other member that has their type of structure. And investors always ask them, why don't you charge us a performance fee as well? Or why don't you raise your fees? You're doing very well. And they said, well, we don't want to stop raising $200 million a year. And I think that is really insightful because so many people are like, oh, well, it's industry standard to charge us 7% pref and take 30%. What are you talking about? It's industry standard to do an acquisition fee, a management fee, et cetera. And it could be for a standard type of investor, but the more entrepreneurial, sophisticated, ultra wealthy individual you run into, the more likely it is they might want something that's uniquely designed, and it's going to make you better use of your own time, because then more often at a meeting, somebody's going to lean forward and say, oh, that's interesting, or I've never seen that before, or I've been looking for something like that.
Yeah, that's really interesting what you just said, long-term greedy. So be willing to maybe forego some of the profit up front in the short term in order to build a bigger portfolio. In this case, the example you just gave is they're sitting on a portfolio worth over $1 billion, and their smaller percentage of that $1 billion, I'm sure, is much better than a higher percentage of maybe a $10 million portfolio.
Right. And I can't tell you how many capital raising grapes just die on the vine and wither in the sun because they don't get enough water to even turn into a grape. They just die a painful life of struggling to raise capital.
Well, so can you give me an example of that?
Oh, yeah. So we have some independent sponsors in the multifamily space who have been to some of their Family Office Club events. They're at the capital raising workshop. We go through about 30 strategies on raising capital, but they're very new to the process. They're looking at properties in 7 different states, and they're looking at JVing with different people, but they're having struggles all around. They're having struggles on where to focus, on what they stand for, on what deals they should be doing, on what cap rates are okay, on what their brand is, what their one-liner is, what their pitch deck should say, who they should be meeting with investor-wise, or what cities they should be raising capital in. So many different layers of struggles. And a lot of people I see just don't get momentum, and they try and they don't break through. And a lot of them come to one of our capital raising workshops because they say, you know what, I've been trying for 14 months to raise capital for this deal, and it's not closing. And I think that we cover a lot of $100,000 mistakes at our events to prevent some of the pain. But I was just speaking to a group like that yesterday, and it reminded me of a story at one of our investor summits. The guy got up there and he said, look, I tried to raise $30 million and I failed and fell flat on my face, and no one would even barely talk to me. And it was my first oil and gas deal. And then I went and I got a $110,000 deal. I put in half the money myself, and I raised the other $55,000 from 6 different investors that put up about $9,000 each. I got that closed. I then did a $400,000 deal 8 months later. I then did about a year later a $800,000 deal. That deal ended up returning $3 million for investors. And then I went out and did a $10 million deal, and now he's closing a $30 million deal. And I love that story because it just shows legitimate building of credibility, track record, developing your own systems, your own investor agreements, your own ability to conduct due diligence and pick great investments to your investors. It shows a long-term mental state of just like knocking out singles and building your own muscle of investing versus a guy that came through pitchdex.com. It's like our marketing material agency for investor relations and people raising capital. We were doing an onboarding call, and he had never raised capital before. And he said, oh, yeah, I'm raising capital for this $800 million deal. And, but I'm going to break it up into parts. The first part's only $190 million. And I just told him, like, look, we got to stop. Before we do anything, I'm not even going to help you with what you've already paid us for until you go watch the capital raising workshop. We got to tighten your focus. You're not going to raise $800 million. It's like saying you're going to beat A-Rod in a game of baseball and you've never picked up a bat before.
It sounds like what you're cautioning is that, hey, you need to build a track record first. Don't start that ambitiously. Be a little bit more realistic. Is that kind of the message I'm getting from you?
For sure. I couldn't agree more. I mean, more power to you if you can come out of the gate and get a $20 million deal done. But most people do not unless you worked at another firm where you helped them get $5, $10, $20 million deals done. But just by chance, 4 days ago, we had another PitchDecks.com member who's in multifamily. He was doing a deal that was, I think, 15 million or so, but then he was going to do some batting practice deals on his own balance sheet that were little 15 unit, 50 unit type deals just to build his muscle on managing and acquiring. I told him, like, stop doing the barbell approach. Instead, do the small deals. And even though you don't need the investor to close a small deal, let them in. Get used to papering the contracts, get used to serving them, get used to reporting to them. Build their trust, have your minimums be low, have them grow with you. So by the time you're doing the $15 million deal, it's deal number 5, and they're comfortable allocating the 250 or the 500 as needed. And in that way, you're gaining more confidence in your own ability as well. Because if you're not sure about stuff, the investor is going to smell that out in the meeting, and you're going to be a much higher conviction if it's deal number 7. And you might raise all 7 deals and actually get that done, which might total $20 million in investments faster than you would going after $15 million out of the gate and never getting it closed, perhaps.
Yeah. I mean, there's not much glory in shooting for the stars and falling flat on your face.
Right. It might sound exciting, but you have to be careful about that.
Yet that one guy who started a $30 million raise and fell flat on his face, he was able to tell that story later on after he'd gone back and done the legwork to build up a smaller portfolio and a track record. So let's talk about the path then. So for our listeners who are looking to get into this space where they're going to do larger deals, and they want to appeal to the centimillionaires, the family offices, what are the steps that they need to be taking?
Sure. The first thing you have to know is that whatever you're doing, there's a lot of other people doing it. And every space is getting more competitive all the time. So you have to know what your background is, what your strength is, and what you're doing that's unique in the marketplace, just so you genuinely are creating unique returns and positive returns. But then also, you need to know that in the context of your competitors, so you aren't saying the same things as them. You might have a unique strategy, but if you're saying the same thing, no one will know that what you're doing is unique. You need to know what investor is most likely to invest with you and have a description of that investor type, their age, their demographics, how they've created their wealth, where they're located, etc. So you can then take your uniqueness and package it in a way where they want it and they're reaching out to you because it's highly desirable to get access to your type of investment. And then you have to narrow down everything you're doing and why you matter on planet Earth to that investor and get it down to a single sentence. And I find that people will spend $30,000 on a website or $10,000 on a pitch deck, etc., but they won't even spend 1 hour of their life narrowing it down, boiling it down, and meditating on exactly what is a one sentence that hits your potential investor set right between the eyes with value. It makes them lean forward and want to respond to your voicemail or email or phone call, because the more sophisticated of an investor you go to, the more stuff is just coming at them all the time, and most of it just looks like noise. But if you really take the time to dial in that one-liner, since nobody does, then it will really make you stand out and get more traction. And I think if you're not willing to do that for your business, you shouldn't ask an investor to meet with you and try to figure out in their brain why you matter and what you're doing is unique. And a general rule is that nobody's going to take you more seriously than you take yourself. If you have a pitch deck that's a bunch of clip art and you don't have a logo, you don't have a website, you don't have a one-liner, you haven't professionalized what you're doing, you haven't put a lot of thought in it, you don't know your competition, you don't know what your investor wants, then you're just being sloppy, and no one should even invest 30 minutes in meeting with you.
Wow. So are you talking about, you're talking about a lot of things there, but I want to go back to what sounds like an elevator pitch, that one-liner. Is that what you're talking about, the elevator pitch?
Yes, but it needs to be used everywhere. So when you leave a voicemail, that should be the only thing you leave in the voicemail besides what action you want them to take, sending you an email or a phone call.
Give us an example of what that would be.
Sure. So one of ours is that we design discrete full balance sheet solutions for $100 million plus families. For Centimillionaire advisors, that's our one-liner. We've found that we do live one-liner judgments at our investor summits, and the investors hold up scorecards 1 through 10. And every time we do this, we learn something new about designing a great one-liner for investors. So it's really fascinating. And we've learned a few things. One is that your one-liner might sound great to you, but your investor might not know what the terminology means. Or a different type of investor might hate it because it's confusing, but to your sophisticated investor, they do know what it means, and it really appeals to them because it breaks through the noise. So who your investor is drastically changes what your one-liner should say. And it's always more valuable if your one-liner can be tangible, like 42 deals closed or 11 years of experience. It's better if it's something that no one else can say, like you are the #1 highest volume multifamily office investor in Indianapolis or in La Jolla, or you're laser focused on self-storage only in La Jolla, et cetera. So you want a unique position, and it's basically a game of credibility and de-risking their time. When they read it, how do you capture their attention in 15 seconds or less so they will answer you? Because otherwise, most people won't.
Wow. Okay. That's great. that's really helpful. I appreciate that.
Sure.
That's a lot of pressure on that one line you're going to come up with. But you've given us great suggestions there on how to make it work. So please continue. I mean, what are some of the other steps that sponsors of these types of opportunities who are raising equity should take to appeal to the family offices?
Sure. We'll definitely have professional materials put together. If nothing else, get a 15 to 19 page pitch deck and get a one-pager put together with a professional logo, just because otherwise the materials won't do you justice. Steve Jobs said that he wants a beautifully designed iPhone box and, metal cover on the iPhone that looks beautiful because it imputes value upon the device and you can charge more for it. Well, the opposite is true with a lot of people out there raising capital for real estate. The materials just don't do them justice, and it hurts your ability to get traction. Also, when you're starting out, I like the analogy of looking at it as you could walk up to a lake with a spear and try to catch a fish, but it's much more effective if you sit down on the side of the lake and really look around, see where the water's flowing, poke around, explore a bit, and see where there might be a waterfall. And like a grizzly bear, figure out where the fish are jumping. So they'll be jumping towards you instead of you chasing them in the lake. So if you know the investor set you're going after, if you can figure out where they congregate, what books they read, what podcasts they listen to, what newsletters they subscribe to, what magazines they read, what events they go to, what associations they're members in, et cetera, and get that dialed in, you'll have investors coming to you or finding you over and over and over again because you're in the flow of the investor relationships. But if you don't do that, then you're just randomly kind of reaching out to fish swimming by and you're not positioned well. So it pays to spend time and energy on positioning because most people raising capital do not. So you're bringing up a lot of great instructions on how to appeal to this segment. But just listening to it in a podcast probably isn't enough. So it sounds like you also offer training, and you also have the Family Office Club. Tell us what services you offer that our listeners could tap into. Sure. Well, the Family Office Club is a membership platform. So if you're an investor, you can reach out, and if you're just looking to allocate or set up your family office or get access to deal flow, that doesn't cost anything just to get registered with us, and you can attend our events or even speak at some. But for those raising capital or looking to improve their investor relations abilities, we have a few different resources. One is our membership in the Family Office Club. It starts at just $199 a month, and then you can come to many of our events, and we offer 25 live events per year. Half of those are investor summits, so you get to hear from 30 investors on stage in a single day. And the other half are capital raising workshops where I go through about 30 strategies like the ones we just talked about in a single day in a small group exercises, worksheets. You can apply the material to what you're doing to raise capital. And we've done, I think, around 40 of those capital raising workshops now. And they're a lot of fun, and they're very fast-paced, and everyone walks away with pages of notes on what they could be doing to improve. Also, we have pitchdecks.com. So we do the pitch deck, one-pager, logo, help develop your one-liner, your investor targeting, etc., all in a single package. Most graphic designers make things look pretty, but they've never raised capital. They've never attracted investors. They don't know the lingo to use or not use. They don't know what your competitors are saying, and we do, because we have 6,500 people coming through the events each year. And then the final thing is free. If you're really just getting started on family offices, trying to figure out the lay of the land, we have a free book at familyoffices.com. Also, if you're just getting started raising capital for the first time, you want to see our 5-step system for raising capital, we have a free book there at capitalraising.com. And then the final thing I'd mention is that ultra wealthy individuals have high quality headaches. People like to joke about, but they do have headaches that they're trying to solve. And we just recently released a book called Centimillionaire Migraines about the top 6 headaches our clients typically always have. And we give away that book for free at centimillionaires.com.
Yeah, and I want to ask you about that too. I don't want to signal that we're wrapping up the conversation.
Sure.
I still have a couple more questions for you.
Sure.
Who should be interested in what you just mentioned, all the services, the books, the conferences? Is there a threshold as to the amount that person would want to be raising? And at that point, they should be considering your services?
It's really anyone who's raising capital from private investors. It doesn't have to be family offices. If you're raising $25,000 or $50,000 or something of that order, you may not need it. You might just need, a single friend or a single family member to help fund your idea. But if you have the intent of being able to raise, $500,000 or $1 million a year or more, we can help speed up that process. We can basically, the best analogy is that you might be running through the jungle at 35 miles per hour, and we could help you get up to 50 miles per hour within a single year of being a member of the Family Office Club, or we can just help save you time or make it so you could raise more than you could otherwise.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to know. I mean, so if you're doing a deal and you've got several deals and you might need $500,000 or more, this is still something you should consider. It's not just for people who are raising $10 million or $100 million.
No, for sure it's not, because it can be a struggle even raising $300,000. It might take you a year to do so, or a year and a half to do so. So the difference of doing it, a few months earlier or in half that time, for $199 a month, it's pretty dirt cheap.
Yeah. And when you come to these conferences, are you also in the room with investors who are centimillionaires?
At the investor summits, it's about 25% investors in the room. And then at the capital raising workshops, it's really just people raising capital because it's an intensive training workshop. But importantly to note, anytime you go to an investor event, especially a family office investor event, after a family office has been established, they'll hire professional staff, and the professional staff are sourcing deals for them. So you'll see angel investors like you would at other investor events. You'll see some private investors like you would at others. But then at the family office level, they have teams of people around them that are helping them make smart decisions on their deals. So usually the centimillionaires themselves might come to 1 or 2 events, get their family office set up, and then have their team coming to screen things for them. Just like I was doing while sending the email this morning to that client I mentioned earlier.
You mentioned your book, Centimillionaire Migraines. What are the 6 headaches that centimillionaires have to face? Sure. The first one is blurred vision. Many times they get to an exit, and it's the first time they've had a major exit. They're not exactly sure what they want to do. And even if they have a good idea, their family members don't, their team doesn't, or they haven't translated that into a direct investment strike zone and a investment program. The second one is family quarrels, or family problems, usually due to lack of governance or just lack of managed expectations, or just real family disputes that are personality based and just, long term in the family, but now they've gotten more severe because of the wealth. Another one is deal flow deficiency. So there's many ways to, mediate that headache. And there's many different positioning strategies. Just like a sponsor would use to attract an investor, a family office can position themselves to attract deal flow consistently. And that's really critical to get the right types of deals coming towards them all the time.
Another one is a sense of loss of control. So control is in their DNA, and now they might have a sense that they are not in full control. There's a lot of unknowns going on. They have to trust a wealth manager more to manage a larger percentage of their wealth. Perhaps they're not sure who's selling them something versus actually acting in their best interest. So sometimes they hold on to too much control, and sometimes they don't hold on to enough and they lose money because of that and learn the hard way. They still need to be in control of their commercial real estate or their direct investments on the operating business side. And then the last two are time constriction pains. Lots of them tell me, I thought I was going to be free after selling the company. I'm busier than ever. Because before they had a main focus. Now everybody wants their time. They want their checkbook. There's opportunities everywhere. They own 2 private jets and 4 extra houses. They've got more LLCs to oversee, more staff that they report to directly, because now they're running a family office and they don't have all their executives that ran their operating business perhaps. And then the final thing is sensitivity to fees. They don't want to pay high fees for average performance. They really want alignment. And they really don't want to pay high fees for someone that doesn't understand the level of complexity they're facing and can't run with them at the speed they need them to.
Wow. Oh, yeah, those are pretty comprehensive there. I want to know a little bit more about you, Richard. Usually I start the conversation finding out about you, but we've learned about what you do. But tell us who you are and how you got into this field.
Sure. Well, I've been doing publicly traded risk consulting, which is about as exciting as it sounds. And I got paid very well to do that. I was paid 6 figures out of my undergrad at age 21. I was making $100,000 a year, and it paid for my MBA in cash. But when my MBA was done, I said, I'm going to go crazy if I keep doing this work. Where else, in my younger 20s, is someone going to pay me 6 figures? And it turns out not many places. So I went to a eat what you kill type career path and got job offers in commercial real estate and raising capital, and went the raising capital route. And while doing so, I stumbled across the term family office and decided I'm not going to call on wealth management firms or institutional investors. I'm only going to reach out to family offices going forward. It's a better use of time because the ultra wealthy are there. And while doing so, I found it very hard to find a thought leader, hard to learn more, hard to even find articles on it. This was back in 2007. So I started writing just to teach myself, and people started calling me, emailing me. I started getting 100 hits a day, 300, 500, 1,000 hits a day on the website, got on the front page of the Boston Globe, got quoted a couple hundred times, and spoke 150 times in 14 countries because of the website and the exposure. Bought familyoffices.com, did a book deal with Wiley, added some more products to what we were doing by listening to customers, and we started hosting our own events. And now, 12 years later, I've done 114 live events. And over that time, we've produced a lot of thought leadership in the industry. So that's really how we've positioned ourselves, just providing value on the space.
And one of the things I'm still not clear on about you is you're a thought leader in the industry, and I love how you became that. I mean, you saw that there was a void, and you became the thought leader. You're obviously a connector. You're connecting the Centimillionaires with the sponsors of the deals. Are you also overseeing family offices?
Yes. So what we do is help people who either want to start a single family office and get their solution in place, and we can help start it, help them run it, or they might have a single family office of some sort, but they need to develop their direct investment program. They want more direct investment deal flow. And we call it Centimillionaire advisors because at that 100 million level, almost everyone needs that type of help. And the traditional wealth management industry really just does the defensive portion of someone's wealth management, not the commercial real estate that's cash flowing, not the direct investments. And so we can help multifamily offices that want to grow faster, but the core of our work is really helping those families get their solution put together. And I think it's good that you asked that, because that's who we advise. We don't engage as an investment banker or a placement agent or a capital raiser and say, hey, yeah, we'll call 100 family offices for you and we'll get those 15 closed for your project that's closing in 60 days. Like, we're not hired gun capital raisers. We're representing the investors, but we do help the capital raisers in ways that we don't think anybody else does with our family office database, with the capital raising workshops, with pitchdex.com. But I think it's really important that is said, because otherwise everyone reaches out and says, oh yeah, Richard could raise that capital for me. But that's just not the model that we have.
Okay, great. Thanks for explaining that. And I think my final question is just going back to the sponsors and the people who are looking to raise money for their opportunities. The ones that you see are successful, what are the common qualities that they have?
Yeah, really great question, because we see so many people flow through the events, so many look the same, but then there's also similarities of those who are winning and raising a lot of capital. So having a unique structure or unique fees helps, but no one's going to invest in you because you have some cool structure or a great fee structure, but it helps them lean forward. Hopefully that's combined with a unique strategy. So the ones who are winning can sit down, maybe they don't have it down to a very clean, awesome one-liner, but very quickly they're able to show someone their credible, genuine, authentic, long-term dedication to honing their craft. And the result of that being a unique value add process. It's usually pretty simple to explain. Like, we buy Midwest office parks at 9% cap rate. We do X, and we do it within a Y structure that we haven't seen anyone else offer to date. So that's very common. A long-term dedication, as I mentioned, and then also very high integrity and a sense of kind of quiet, humble confidence of they know they have something unique. They're confident about the value of it. They're not too pushy. They're not talking over you. They're good listeners, and they're really in it for the long term. Anyone who feels like they're running around, sweating at the conference, trying to shake everyone's hand, stressed out about their next closing, nobody wants to work with them. That just shows they're about to go out of business if they don't get the deal closed.
Wow. Wow. Thank you. Any final thoughts as we wrap up this conversation?
Just that I think the most important thing, in life and for business and for capital raisers and for investors is integration and integrity. So not just acting in alignment with good morals, but having so that the people on your team, your core values, where you live, what communities you're in, the food you eat, the deals you close, the deal flow you seek, what you spend your time on, everything has to be aligned. So if you're a family office that made their money in manufacturing and you want to invest in commercial real estate, you probably understand warehouses better than the average investor. Or maybe you should be investing only in manufacturing companies and not the hot cannabis startup or the mobile app or whatever. If you're raising capital, it means aligning who's on your team, what you say to investors, the deals you show, what you're saying yes to make sure that you're saying yes to deals that are in alignment with your strategy and your background and DNA, and not just the deal that fell in your lap or because there's not many good deals in the marketplace, you're just doing one to get it done.
Oh, great. One more time, I know you gave us a lot of ways to contact you and download some of your books, but what other ways would people be able to get a hold of you, or other ways that they can learn about what you're doing?
Sure. Well, in addition to the Family Office podcast, the two most simple places to go would just be capitalraising.com or familyoffices.com.
Any social media places where people might go?
Yeah, on LinkedIn, you can find us under Family Office Club. On Twitter, if you type in Richard C. Wilson, Family Office Club, come up there. My handle is Richard C. Wilson with no spaces on Twitter. And on Facebook, we're at the Family Office Club as the extension on the URL there.
Well, Richard, I really enjoyed this conversation. You've given us so much great information about raising money, not just from the Centimillionaires and the family offices that you represent, but just overall rules that everyone should follow when it comes to raising money. So thank you so much. This was a great conversation. I really appreciate you being on the show.
Yeah, it was fun being here. Anytime.
I want to thank everybody for listening to this episode. I'm your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group, and you can find out more about me by going to higinvestor.com. That's higinvestor.com. And you can also ask questions and join us on Facebook by going to RPOA, Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast. This episode was sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. And RCB and Associates, helping real estate investors and small business owners navigate the complex world of health insurance and Medicare benefits at rcbassociatesllc.com.
You've been listening to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association. You can find out more at rpoaonline.org. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and review.